Guys, welcome to Sean vs. Wild, the podcast with hot questions and even hotter guests. I'm your host, the man, the myth, the Sean Thriller Smith, the guy putting rad back into talk radio. And today, it's time to rock and roll all night and podcast every Tuesday. Today on the show, I've got Chris Browder from Mansions. Guys, you know Mansions. Very awesome dude. Chris and I have known each other for, since I was in high school. And this is the first time we've been able to chat in maybe over a decade, honestly. So we sat down, had a great conversation. You're going to like what you hear today. And Mansions just released their first album in 4 years. That is out now. You'll have links in the show notes. We're going to be listening to some tracks off of that brand new album. So it was a great convo. It was great to catch up, and we could have talked forever. This is just the first of many conversations I will have with Chris Browder. So I hope you guys enjoy the show today. Hopefully everybody had a great Halloween last week. Hope you enjoyed the last week's episode with the tarot reading. That's something new and different for me, but I really like it. So make sure you book your appointment with M if you haven't already. And then, yeah, dude, big week for me because, I mean, all the Halloween stuff, you know? And then over the weekend, I went and saw He Is Legend with Summer Youth and Foxbat opening up. To give you my review on the show, Sounds Like a Lawsuit was the first band that played. New metal, you know, it's a new metal band, not necessarily my style, but I got to give it to them. Well rehearsed, well practiced, very solid. The sound at Trixie's was fantastic. You know, I know it's a strip club, but if you haven't been there, the live audio is absolutely fantastic. Sounds Like a Lawsuit was great. Like I said, new metal. So if you're into that, check them out. Summer Youth played. Summer Youth sounded fantastic as well. New bass player, I didn't get a chance to meet him. So new bass player, you killed it. All right. And come on the show and we'll talk about it formally. We'll talk about it formally. And then Foxbat, of course, destroyed it. To me, Foxbat, show stealer. Okay, showstopper for me. Love those dudes and absolutely nailed it. What a great live set. He Is Legend played. They were fantastic. I will say it seemed like the vocalist was kind of dialed down a little bit. Not so much in stage presence, but just in volume. So, but I still had a great time. And I've been a big fan of He Is Legend for, over a decade now as well. So being able to hear songs from like I Am Hollywood and stuff like that, very cool. Attack of the Dungeon Witch from Suck Out the Poison, another one of my personal faves that they played. So I did that this weekend. Also finished up Stranger Things Season 2. No spoilers here, guys, okay? No spoilers, but I will say, man, that was a great one. And that kid that plays Will, I'll tell you what, bro, there's big things coming to you, bro. Great actor. Didn't notice you very much in Season 1, Season 2. Easily the standout. You're going places, man. So big ups to you. Congratulations. Stranger Things Season 2. Highly recommend it. If you haven't watched it, check it out. I'm sure you've watched it by now, okay? You guys are just like me. We have similar tastes. But if you haven't, check it out. Also, at the time of this recording, it is Sunday, and I'm recording this intro on Sunday morning because I'm about to pack up and go to Indianapolis to go see Lady Gaga. Got offered Friday morning. My sister hit me up via text. She's like, hey, I'm going to go see Lady Gaga. My husband can't go. Your brother-in-law, Adam, can't go. Do you want to go? So I'm headed up there, and I'm stoked. Lady Gaga is going to be an amazing show. I'm all about the showmanship, so that's like the music that I'm into. Kiss, Alice Cooper, Motley Crue, David Bowie, those people that really put up Marilyn Manson, people that put on an awesome show, and I think Lady Gaga is going to also destroy it. So I'm very excited to see her live and in person. So that's what I'm doing today, and very busy. And then we've got this new podcast. So everybody, thank you so much for tuning in. I hope everyone had a great week since the last time we talked, and I hope you have a great week going forward. I just ask, please, if you do like what you hear, all of this is done on my dime. It's not necessarily the cheapest. If you want to support the show, the easiest way to do that is simply, share this post. If you see it on Facebook, please share it. Please retweet it on Twitter. If you haven't, please just click subscribe. If you have an iPhone, look up Sean vs. Wild on your podcast app. Subscribe. Maybe throw a 5-star review on there. Anything that you can do like that would help me out immensely. If you really want to help me out, check out the sponsors at Audible. So go to audibletrial.com/Sean vs. Wild from your desktop or laptop. and sign up for a free 30-day trial of Audible. When you do that, you get a free audiobook of your choosing. So pick from over 180,000 audiobooks. And then when you sign up, it actually gives me a monetary kickback, a reimbursement. So, and Audible's very generous. So I just got to get you to do it. So please go to audibletrial.com/Sean vs. Wild from your laptop or desktop and sign up for that free 30 days now and get your free audiobook. Also, you can check out the OG sponsor at audiofileinc.com. I'm talking about Shane at Audiophile Inc. Tell him that the Wild Man sent you, but he's going to print anything that you want. T-shirts, sweatshirts, hoodies, tank tops, whatever it is. If you have an idea, if you have a business, if you have a band, I mean, it's perfect for bands. If you want to get the best deal on some new merch, you got to go to Shane. So simply go to audiofileinc.com and ask for Shane. Tell him the Wild Man sent you, and you're going to get the best deal in town, no matter what town you live in. Also, per usual, I got to give a big shout out to Joe Brock. He's always booping the dials, helping me out, making this podcast run. So please support him if you need any help with some audio production or engineering, or maybe you have a podcast or something, you want a sick theme song. Joe's got your back. He did the Sean vs. Wild one, and he's got some other ones that he's going to be doing for me, hint, hint, here in the future. So definitely check that out. Also, guys, this is a call to action. I got that movie pass. You probably heard me talk about that in the past couple weeks. And I've been hitting up the movies, but I want to actually sit down and have discussions with people about the movie, about movies that we go see in the theater. So if you like to go see movies in the theater, or you want to start going to see movies in the theater and talk about it on a podcast, please hit me up, and we will do just that. So it's your call to action. Hit me up, SeanVsWild@gmail.com. Let me know if you're interested in being on the show, or, of course, the Sean vs. Wild Facebook, or my personal Facebook, guys. Anything you can do would be awesome. Now, I've talked a long time, this intro, but I appreciate everybody listening, and that's going to be enough for me. Everybody, have a great week. It's time to get wild. Chris Browder, you old so-and-so.
Hey, what's going on?
You didn't think I was going to do it because I mentioned it before I even hit the record button. I was like, I'm going to say Chris Browder, you old so-and-so. And then sure enough, I did it.
I thought you were speaking figuratively, yeah.
No, that's what you get with me, man. I'm the real deal. What you see is what you... WYSIWYG, as we say in the business. You know what I'm saying? Dude,
that's right.
It's so great to hear from you. It's so great to just hear your voice because, honestly, you and I have known each other for a long time, but we probably haven't talked in the better part of a decade, maybe longer.
Yeah, totally. Yeah. And even before that, it's not like we were having like heart to heart discussions every week or something. So
right. We would just get together on the weekends and drink some Bacardi Raz or play some music together.
Oh my God. Yeah, you're right.
Bacardi Raz. I remember Ryan Davis on top of Eli's apartment one time yelling Bacardi Raz into the night sky. So yeah. But we had great times though back in the day. The collegiate gang,
That's right. Yeah. Yeah. We had there was a good crew of people hanging out for a while.
Yeah. I mean, I always wanted to go to collegiate school. I was always jealous. I was like, man, these collegiate kids are awesome. They're throwing the awesomest parties. They're doing the coolest stuff, going to tsunamis on the weekends, so
there was a lot of not cool people there too. So we had a lucky group.
Yeah. You had a you had a good class, I would say, of people.
Yeah, for sure. Yeah.
You ever talked to any of the old gang? Yeah, have you talked to Ryan Davis lately?
I talked to Davis more than I talked to other people, probably, just because stuff comes up with music things. And I don't make it back to town very often. Like usually if I'm in town, it's just for a couple of days, like seeing my family and that kind of thing. So I don't keep up with people as much as I should, but I have, the certain ones that I keep up with, definitely.
Yeah, I know he's staying busy. He's with the label, and he just had Cropped Out Fest and all that sort of thing. I need to get him on the podcast too, just to catch up with him as well. So
yeah, I always keep up. It feels like me and him have been on sort of parallel paths, but doing very different versions of what we each do. Where it's cool to keep up with what's going on with him and the band and the label and all that stuff.
Yeah. I mean, it's like I said, it's just great to hear your voice, Browder, man. You know what I'm saying? Just
It's
having
mutual. Feelings mutual.
Yeah. Well, guys, while we're catching up here, welcome to the Sean versus Wild podcast. I'm your host, the man, the myth, the Sean Thriller Smith, the guy putting rad back into talk radio and all that other hyperbole. But the important part is today on the show, I've got Chris Browder. You might know him better from his musical group Mansions, kind of a big deal back in the day. And they've got new music coming out. And as soon as I saw that, I was like, I got to get old Browder on the podcast and catch up and chat. And now he's here. So, Browder, thanks so much for doing the show. I appreciate it so much.
I'm happy to be here. It's always fun to talk.
Yeah, dude. And, I think one of the main reasons why we might not have really got a chance to chat so much is you're no longer located in Louisville. You're off in Seattle now.
That's right. We moved so I lived in Louisville and then went to North Carolina to go to college for a while and then stuck around there. And then we moved to Seattle like 6 or 7 years ago. So it's been a long time since I've lived in Louisville, but it's obviously still an important place to me.
Yeah. How do you like Seattle?
It's great, man. We thought we might just be here for a couple of years, but I don't think we're going to leave at this point. It's just got everything that, we would kind of want in a big place. Even stuff like working jobs has been a lot easier where people have experience with people in bands. So being able to take time off to tour and that kind of stuff was way easier here than it was in North Carolina.
Yeah, I can only imagine. I mean, Seattle's has a revolutionary music scene. I mean, it's even called the Seattle music scene, the Seattle sound. So I imagine there's a lot of people playing music up there.
Yeah, it was crazy when I first walked in to my temp job at UW, and the guy who was supervising me, I was like, "Oh, I recognize you," because he played guitar for David Bazan from Page of the Lion and stuff like that. And I was like, "How Seattle of an experience where I just walk in and my supervisor I recognize from a band." And so of course he understood the deal and was really good to us right off the bat.
That's awesome, man. I've maybe not had the greatest, experience in Seattle just because randomly we were in Oregon and Washington for 10 days on the last tour, and it was very rough 10 days, and the locals hated us. They were just like, "Hey, you're in a band? Go ahead and just play and then leave." But I will say that's just a venue type thing. But I did enjoy Seattle very much. Specifically, that was the highlight of the Oregon-Washington 10-day run, and we got a chance to we played the Fun House. Are you familiar with that venue?
Yeah, at El Corazon.
Yeah. El Corazon, the Fun House. Yeah, so we played there, and then afterwards it was just kind of we have a night in Seattle, so we drove around, found Kurt Cobain's house on Google Maps.
Yeah, I got to do that.
Yeah, so hauled the van and trailer up a few mountainous roads, basically caught was able to catch a look at Kurt Cobain's house, and then randomly somebody from Louisville that we know lived in Seattle, and was like, "Hey, my friends have a house party / venue in their home, and they're having bands. Why don't you guys come enjoy the bands? And there's keg beer here, and you can just hang out and party." And that's what we did, and everybody at that party, super cool.
Nice, that's awesome. Yeah. The shows in Seattle, whenever we played Seattle on tour, the shows were always terrible. I think people just don't care about bands in a lot of ways because they just get too much of it. So
yeah.
But that's good that you got at least good hangout time with people. We've always had fun hanging out with people, but the shows are hit or miss.
Right. I figure they probably are just we've seen it. Everybody comes to Seattle. Everybody wants to be in a band here. We get it. So I kind of took that with a grain of salt, but the partying, the cool people that I met at the party, couldn't ask for a cooler time. One of the best tour memories that I actually have. Somebody had a venue in their home, and there was a show going on, and then they welcomed us with open arms and complimentary beer.
That's awesome. Yeah.
So yeah, and well, that's my Seattle story. I'm glad that you're enjoying it, man. I'm glad that you know, I'm glad that you're happy out there and you got everything going for you. And I'm most happy though that you're making new music, because I hadn't heard from you musically in a while, and then randomly I saw a post and it's like, hey, Mansions is back with a brand new song and a brand new album coming out. So that's what I'm most stoked about for you there.
Yeah, us too. You know, it had been like 4 years since we put anything out, and like, you know, I was working on music that whole time, but it was just, there was no need to like be telling people like, hey, yeah, we're still working on music, just FYI, you know, we're not totally dead.
Right. Yeah.
But it was like until there was new stuff actually for people to hear, we just kind of laid low for a while, did normal life, tried to avoid playing shows, and but yeah, it's exciting to actually have a payoff from all that and have people be hearing new stuff.
Yeah. Well, I'll tell you what, we'll chat a little bit more about the new record, but I want to kind of go back in time. We're going back to the early 2000s here to basically the inception of Mansions in the Once More Than Never days. You know what I'm saying?
Yeah.
The precursor. What, I guess in general, what got you into music? What bands got you into music? What made you want to venture out and do what later became Mansions?
That's a good question. So in like middle school, I got really into Christian ska. That was kind of my dark past of music, and that was like my first exposure to really like just getting into bands and going to shows and all that kind of thing.
What are some of the Christian ska bands you were into?
Like Five Iron Frenzy.
Gotcha.
Yeah, like they were the best one. There was other ones that were stupider, but I still liked.
I was going through all my ska bands that I loved, and I was like, which ones are the Christian ones? And then as soon as you said Five Iron Frenzy, I'm like, yes, those guys.
Yeah, I mean, I was into, you know, there's also like Less Than Jake, and then there's kind of more the like pop punky side of like MXPX and stuff like, and like Blink-182, you know, things like that. Like all those bands that kind of made it seem attainable to be in a band. And so I started playing, you know, with various friends. I was playing bass for a long time. And then I started getting really into Foo Fighters, like into those first two records in particular. And I remember reading about how that first Foo Fighters record where he like, you know, played everything himself. And then I was like, oh, that's awesome. Like I can do that, you
Right.
know, like as like a naive 14-year-old. So I started playing around with just like, recording stuff on like the free version of Pro Tools that you could download on your computer. And, so I was doing that. And then I started getting more into like, Jimmy Eat World and the Get Up Kids, Dashboard Confessional, like all that kind of world. And so then that started turning into like making those Once More Than Never records, where I was I played everything on the first few of them. It was like I would make like a full length album like every like 6 months, which was just like unnecessary, you know.
That's a lot of work. That's a lot of songwriting and a lot of production.
Yeah, it was a great like way of learning stuff, but it's still just like, you know, pretty cringeworthy. But then you know, started playing with Ryan Davis started playing in the band, and Robbie Adelberg playing drums. And so then I guess when I went off to college, and we all went off to college, and then we were kind of still playing when we came back home, and we made one album with the three of us as Once More Than Ever, and then another one where we shortened it to Once More, because that's what everybody was doing at the time, was shortening their band names.
Right.
And yeah, and that was, you know, how like I met you and all those other bands like around in Louisville. That was such like a formative experience, playing all those random shows at like the Lang House and stuff like that.
Yeah, I remember the Lang House quite a bit. Or Ryan Davis's basement shows.
The basement was key. That was it wasn't the first place I'd ever played a show because I played in other bands, but like the first, playing solo and singing and that kind of stuff was all Davis's basement.
Well, my first band, real band, when I say real band, I mean my first band that actually had a singer was Two for Flinching with Ryan Davis singing.
Oh yeah, yeah.
And we had a lot of we practiced in the basement, and like those shows were like the first shows I ever played in front of, people. And those were some pretty formative years for me. And actually, Two for Flinching recorded our demo in your basement with you.
I was going to say that. I recorded you guys, yeah.
Yeah. I mean, as soon as when you were talking, dude, the memories just kept coming back to me, because not only did we record the Two for Flinching demo, but whenever I was in Tears Like Bullets, that band,
yeah.
we recorded our demo there too.
Well, it was funny with that Two for Flinching demo. I totally forgot about this, but I remember Chris Lienhardt.
Yes, Chris Lienhardt.
Like he just couldn't get his parts right when he was playing it. Like he just the rhythm was just not happening.
Right.
And so then you guys went to lunch, and I just like re-recorded a bunch of his parts because I could just figure it out. It was just like power chords,
Right. Yeah, the good old days.
Yeah, and then you guys came back, and I think I was just like, oh yeah, I just cleaned some stuff up in the computer. Now the rhythm works.
Quantized it, dude. Synced it up. Now it's great, dude. You nailed it. I just put some distortion on that thing, man. A little reverb. Perfect.
That's right. Yeah, that's all it takes.
Dude, Chris Lienhardt, if you're listening, shout out to you, buddy. I know you're still around, hanging out, hanging tough, but that was a fun story at your expense, unfortunately.
I mean, everyone was like 15 at the time, and I'm sure I didn't play it any better at all.
Oh, I'm sure the tempo, everything, the tempo changes were horrible from a drumming standpoint. And I remember Robbie Adelberg came up to me and was like, "Dude, I really like the sound of that crash cymbal. It sounds like breaking glass. How did you do that?" And I'm just like, "Well, I have a chintzy old cymbal that I'm hitting, and it's probably broken. That's how I achieved the sought-after broken glass effect."
Your signature sound. Yeah.
Ah, yes, the signature sound. I could spot that from anywhere. But man, yeah, those are the good old days. I mean, the basement shows. And actually, I remember briefly, I don't know if you remember this because it was just a one and done thing, but one time randomly, I filled in for Once More Than Never on drums.
Seriously?
Yes. One time, I believe it's Once More Than Never. I remember you were doing a rendition of that Two for Flinching classic song, Speaker. But that had a different name, and it was a different thing. But Robbie couldn't make a show, I think maybe at the warehouse in Clarksville. So we went to Robbie Adelberg's house, and played the set a few times, and then I played the show with you once.
Nice. What was it? Was it a 4-piece?
It was me, you, and Ryan Davis.
Oh, okay.
I know.
Yeah, I mean that sounds like that. I wondered if it was this band Saving Latin.
That was it.
Cutter
Actually,
played into.
You know what? Saving Latin. That was it.
Yeah, that was a classic. We got school credit for that band somehow.
Nice. See, I could have went to collegiate. I did some extracurricular activities, got some credit.
Yeah, exactly.
For filling in. Okay, Saving Latin. But see, dude, that's what it's all about back in the day. Two for Flinching. Once More Than Never, Saving Latin, Come and Yeha.
Oh God, yeah, that's right.
So, but yeah, that's the fun thing though, is like I talk a lot about growing up in the music scene, but you're like a special part of like me actually growing up before I was cool I'm not really all that cool, but when you like get in a serious band and you're not just like goofing around with your friends and you're like taking it seriously, like you guys know me from all my unserious, I have no idea what I'm doing years playing music.
Yeah, totally. I think like we were so lucky that there was actually that going on, where there was like multiple venues that you could play at, and like everyone had enough friends that like you could play a show for like a good crowd of people, even though you had no idea what you were doing, you know?
Yeah.
But yeah, being able to figure that out and have this like supportive environment where there wasn't some band of like 25-year-olds laughing at all the 15-year-olds, you know, doing stupid things. But
Yeah, man. That was always good, and you're right. There were venues, but the big thing is people had the resources where even if there wasn't a venue, you know, there's a basement show or there's a house party or there's somewhere that you can go, and we just invite all of our friends that we went to high school with, and you're basically trying out playing Rockstar in front of 100, 200 people, where however many people, but they're all your friends and family. So.
yeah, exactly. And like I think about that stuff all the time when like we'll play with other bands that, you know, are like great people, but then they're the kinds where like they don't know how to play if they don't have like the best monitor mix going on, or like, you know, there's not like a nice green room or stage for them. And it's just like having played, you know, in a bowling alley or in someone's basement and having that be like, this is what a show is, you know, that makes a big difference, like for the rest of your life of what you expect the show to be like.
Exactly. I mean, I feel the same way too. I'm like, man, yeah, dude, I'm not even used to playing places that have like a stage per se. So if I'm like playing on a place that has like a huge stage, or whenever I was playing places that have huge stages, I'm like, man, this is crazy. Or sometimes it's just like, man, this is overkill. I'm used to playing on the floor most of the time, you know?
Yeah, totally. Yeah. And when like, you know, when you see these bands that do a lot with like tracks and computers playing stuff and things, it's like, if you can't play your show with just like one microphone plugged into a terrible PA, then like, I don't think you can really play, you know, I don't think you count as a band.
I would agree a whole 100%, one whole 100% on that. And I saw a lot of bands, not to call anybody out in particular, but it is crazy when you see so many bands. I think having tracks for like a little extra flavor, whatever, that's, you know, that's grown on me over the years. Like I can't say, I mean, I used to have like a big qualm with it, but man, sometimes I'll just see bands that are lip syncing with you know, ripping a guitar solo that's on a track, and they're just pretending to play, and that drives me insane.
Yeah, and I get it, where it's this kind of slippery slope where at first you're like, oh, we really need the synthesizer to do this thing, and then it's like, well, we might as well have this other one in there too, and then oh yeah, and the recorded guitar sounds better than the live one anyways, and like, oh, let's add those background vocals, and like, you know, you have to accept that the live stuff isn't going to sound as good as the recorded stuff, but it has something, you know.
It has a charm all its own. It's its own animal.
Yeah, right.
Well, it gives a human element. That's my thing. Is like that's what I enjoy about seeing a live show is the human element. And if it's not 100% perfect, that's fine. But it could be even cooler than what I'm used to hearing. You know, it could be even more organic or more passionate or more, I don't know, badass for one reason or another. But whenever you're just, you know, tracking and it's just the same thing I've heard on the record, I can listen to the record at home on Spotify for $9.99 a month.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, like what I'm most interested in is when you hear something on a record and you're like, man, I really don't know like how they would do that live, and then like seeing them live and saying, oh, you know, they totally turn that song around and to make it work. And I think that's just way more interesting than sounding like the record.
I agree. Well, and speaking of records, you put out quite a few records. So we're at Once More Than Never territory, I guess, in our little timeline here. And what made you go from Once More Than Never to, where does the transition go from Once More Than Never to Mansions? Is that like college age for you? Are you in North Carolina at that point?
Yeah, so we were in college. I think it was maybe my sophomore year when we made the last Once More record, and we, you know, played one show for it. I think it was on my birthday that year, and that was like the last show that the band ever played. And it was just like, you know, we all lived in different cities, and it had kind of run its course in a way. So that was done, and then I was just in school and working on songs myself. I did a bunch of like acoustic covers for a while. That was kind of like before everyone was doing the like emo versions of pop songs on YouTube and that type of thing. And so actually that's sort of how Mansions got going, because I was doing my own stuff and it wasn't called Mansions yet. I was figuring out a different name. But then I was doing these acoustic covers and they were starting to get attention from like just random people and like on MySpace and that kind of thing. And then I covered an Emmanuel song. And then that got passed back to, Matt Breen or whoever, which like, we had played shows with them and like, I knew them from around, but like, I didn't really know them like that,
Right.
And then, Breen really liked the cover. And so I think like we started talking about maybe forming a band, and I started playing in some of the songs that I was working on. And then, and he like, helped me shape some of those songs a little bit, which, was real cool. And then, they got me in contact with their manager, Yvonne. And she really liked my stuff. And that was like how Mansions got going. Like, I started working with Yvonne, and she started shopping us around to labels and that kind of thing. But that was all through Emmanuel, and like, I went to their studio, set up and like recorded some more demos, and they were just like super generous and helpful to me, as far as kind of getting Mansions off the ground. Because I wasn't like really playing shows at that point. I was just recording a lot and kind of trying to get a demo together to be able to do something.
What song was it? Which Emmanuel song was it that you covered? I'm trying to think back and remember.
It was The New Violence.
Okay. Yep. I remember hearing that on MySpace back in the day.
Yeah. Yeah, that was like peak MySpace time. That was like when you could get a career off of MySpace.
Right. Before everyone had a MySpace band page.
Yeah, before like the bots invaded.
Right, yeah. Exactly. Before you could have like glittery text. You know what I'm saying?
Exactly.
Rotating GIFs, text GIFs. Gotcha. Well, and I had Brian Whiteman actually on the show, which you said you heard that show. That was pretty cool that you tuned in. But and Brian and Tone, now they actually played on your first release for Doghouse, right?
Anthony played drums. Whiteman, like, he was together with us while we were practicing and like working out the songs. Like he played bass for us, like kind of workshopping the songs.
Gotcha.
But then he didn't actually come up to record. But he recorded some bass for our second record for Dig Up the Dead. He played on a couple songs. Yeah, I mean, Whiteman's been a big part of doing stuff. And even, man, like Anthony and Breen played a couple shows as like the band, as Mansions. We played like one show in Louisville, and then I think one show at my college in North Carolina, which is hilarious to think about.
Yeah,
but
just the dudes, you guys and the dudes in Emmanuel just rocking Wake Forest.
Yeah, and like once they came through town on tour, and like Barber recorded a guitar solo on one song that I was working on, like like in all the kind of demos leading up to our official stuff coming out, there's just all sorts of like weird appearances by Emmanuel members.
That's awesome, man. And there's always just kind of been like a brotherhood, I think, of musicians from this area. Everybody's trying to help each other succeed for the most part, you know?
Yeah, it was cool. And like, they totally like didn't have to do that for me at all.
Right.
But they, went out of their way to, because I don't know like how I would have like found a manager, or like, even if they hadn't done what they had done, I don't think I would have thought that, oh yeah, like being in a band and like touring nationally is something that you can do.
Right.
Because they were that like success story for Louisville, where it was like, yeah, I've seen them play Ryan's Basement, and now I'm seeing them on Fuse TV or whatever.
Right, exactly. Yeah, they're huge inspirations. I know for me, my band, the music, and still to bands to this day, they're kind of like that breakout band. That's the first one that was like, hey, they did it. That means we can do it. So let's get over there. But yeah, so now you're hooked up with Avange and you're shopping your stuff, and you get picked up. I mentioned Doghouse earlier, so Doghouse Records is the first label that you signed with.
Yeah, and they actually contacted me via MySpace. They sent a MySpace message.
Oh, nice.
And took me out to dinner, and yeah, so our first record, New Best Friends, was on Doghouse, and we recorded that in like, I think, early 2008, with this producer Mike Sapone, who's done like all brand new stuff and a bunch of other really cool things. But then it took like a year to come out after that, which was sort of the beginning of the like, oh, maybe Doghouse isn't going to work out great for us.
Dude, that's the whole thing about a record label in general. And like, I'm not dogging anyone in particular, guys, don't read into it, but I will say this. The waiting game after your stuff is done, they're like, we need you to go ahead and record this. So you're like, all right, man, I got to get this done. And you put all your time and effort into it, and then they get it, and they're like, all right, man, well, maybe in a year or two, we'll get around to it.
Yeah, and it was like such a weird time too, where like I feel like we signed the deal with Doghouse and recorded the record, and like there was still some money in labels, like things hadn't totally collapsed,
right?
Where like we had a good budget for the record, and then it felt like a year later, like everything was over, and it felt like they were sort of just waiting for us to get popular, so that then they could put out the record once people liked us. And we're like, yeah, no one's gonna like us if we don't have like a record out. And like, we just didn't have that luck that you kind of need at that phase of, getting on the right tours and getting your stuff in front of the right people. So by the time the record came out, it was just sort of like, yeah, here, it's out, I guess.
Right. It's kind of like that conversation they have in Bill and Ted where they're like, we're never going to get popular without an awesome music video. And well, we're never going to have an awesome music video until we get Eddie Van Halen. And it's like,
exactly.
We're not going to get Eddie Van Halen unless we actually learn how to play. Well, we're not going to need to learn how to play. That's why we get Eddie Van Halen. And then, that kind of one of those things. They're not going to like us. I mean, that is the thing. If you don't have a product for them to take home and listen to, it's going to be very difficult to win people over on the road playing music if they don't have anything to take home after the show's over,
Yeah, exactly. Like, and I feel like the music industry in general is kind of like that, where it's like they're all waiting for someone else to take a chance on it and get something big, where it's like they don't really have a plan. They don't really know how to break a band, which makes sense because I don't think anyone really knows that. There's so many weird factors.
Right.
But like with Doghouse, like, they were always sort of unhappy that we weren't getting great tours. And then we finally got a tour with the Get Up Kids, which was like a huge deal to me because they're like, one of my all-time favorite bands.
Same. One of my all-time favorites also.
Yeah. Like, I mean, it was just insane to tour with them. And then we were on that tour and we didn't have any CDs to sell because Doghouse couldn't get them to us in time, even though we gave them like, months and months of notice. And it was like, yeah, all right, this is just how it goes.
Sure. Hey, we'll have burnt copies in the back, guys.
Yeah, we literally started burning copies and just giving them to people because it was so stupid.
But, well, and then, so how long are you on? How many records did you do with Doghouse?
We just did one record, and then they had an option for another one, and like I had recorded a bunch of stuff that turned into the second record, and I could tell they didn't really want to do it. I didn't really want to do it with them, and so we were just like, yeah, can we just go our separate ways? And so, thankfully they were kind enough to let us just leave.
Yeah, that's always nice when you're able to, just cut your ties cleanly, and you don't have to drag it out like in, with money and all that sort of thing.
Yeah, they were really good to us from that standpoint.
That's good. And then, so now you're in the timeline. You're not. You've left, and you've got other songs. You got stuff in the bag. What becomes of Mansions from there?
So it was weird. We were no longer with Avange. We had a different manager, um, and like it didn't seem like anyone was particularly interested in the band. And it was kind of like, we everything had been working out where it was like, we had a demo, shopped it around, a label that was one of my dream labels wanted to sign us. We recorded a record with like a dream producer of mine and like put it out. And it was like everything had gone really well, but then nothing really happened with the band. Like we just didn't really catch on. And so it was a big like blow emotionally as far as like, okay, do I want to try to keep doing this, or is it
Right.
like, well, that was a good shot and we got to do it for a little while. But so I like just worked on a bunch of music, just recording myself, which I've always been interested in that aspect, but also it was like no one was offering us money to record, so it was like this is the way that it's got to happen if it's going to happen.
Right.
And then we got lucky where there was this guy John Lulo, he works for Crush Music Management, like doing stuff with like Train and Weezer and Fall Out Boy and things like that. And he took a liking to us, and it was really important for me because like I was working on these songs that were kind of turning into the second record, and still no one was really responding to it when we like sent it around to labels and that kind of thing. But John was really good as far as like believing that I could do something more than what I was doing, and helping be encouraging, but also like pushing to keep writing,
Right.
and to keep doing more, just making more songs. And so like the first draft of our second album, Dig Up the Dead, like wasn't very good. It had some of the same songs that ended up on the actual record, but like it was just kind of missing something. But with his sort of like coaching through it, then it turned into a record where it was like, all right, we've got something that I want to put out at least, so let's keep doing this. And then that ended up just getting put out with like a buddy of ours that was starting up a label. And yeah, so it wasn't like, the offers were pouring in from labels or something like that, but at least we had a way of getting it out into the world.
Yeah, and honestly, probably by that time, how far along are you? Probably 2010, 2011 ish, somewhere in that area.
Yeah, exactly.
I mean, by that time, most independent record labels are just a formality at that point. Anyway, you got to self-publish your own stuff. I mean, self-publishing your own stuff for a band of, in that level, I guess. You're gonna wind up better anyway, because if you did sign to a label, it's just gonna be kind of like more of the same, kind of like what you experience with. With like maybe what you experienced with Doghouse or something like that. You basically really have at that point. What I'm getting at is just like the independent label was obsolete pretty much at that point. Minus just like the kind of self. Publishing your own kind of stuff, small labels, what have you. I guess not so much independent label, but independent the way that it was when we were growing up. There were so many like, Vagrant and, Victory and all these labels would pick bands up, break them, make them. But that kind of thing is already done in the past by 2010, 11, 12.
Yeah, exactly. It was all over, and it seemed like there wasn't much point. And the way that we had been sort of burned by being on a label, like I didn't want to be jumping back into that situation with anyone really again. Yeah,
but obviously it's done well, because I was just checking out a lot of the stuff just for nostalgia purposes, and just to kind of beef up on this cast, man, but there's like a few million streams on your independently released Dig Up the Dead. So you're doing all right for yourself in that aspect.
Yeah, well, yeah, and that whole thing is weird because like I think that record struck a nerve with a certain group of people like pretty hard, but not within those first few years, you know. Like, you know, now people talk about that being kind of like the record for us as far as like, you know, which one they like best and all that kind of thing. But like at the time, like nobody cared, and we were playing shows to nobody, you know. So it's not like we put out some landmark album and everyone loved it. But it's, I mean, it's cool that people seem to still be like discovering it in a way.
Yeah. Well, hey, that's the good thing about the internet, you know. Things are going to be there waiting whenever someone's ready to check it out, you know.
Yeah, exactly. It doesn't just disappear.
Right. And then, so Dig Up the Dead, and then you put out an album after that as well, Doom Loop.
Yeah, and so that one, like, you know, we had done Dig Up the Dead and still had some of the kind of same experience of just touring, but, you know, not having it not be that great and still not feeling like it was like happening necessarily. And then we did a tour with Taking Back Sunday and got hooked up with this drummer for that tour who we had never met before. His name's John Momberg. And we really hit it off with him, and it was like, oh great, like we've finally like found our guy to like play drums for the band. And at that same time, Robin plays bass in the band. We had moved to Seattle, like kind of right when Dig Up the Dead came out. And like I had always had this feeling of like, well, it's either playing music or like quitting and getting a full-time job.
Right.
And the threat of like getting a full-time job was, you know, a big threat in my mind. But then once we moved to Seattle, like we started working full-time, and we would leave to go on tour, and would keep like working on making music on the side. And it started to feel more like, oh, this is something like we can do. We can like do both things. It doesn't have to be such like a choice. So then like we made Doom pretty similarly to how we made Dig Up the Dead, except that we had John playing drums in Texas at the time, and, you know, emailing them up to us. But it was kind of a different feeling, where I think that album's a little more fun in a way, because it was more fun to be making music. It was less like, woe is me, this isn't working out kind of thing.
Right.
Yeah, and so that was one, that guy, John Lulo, who I mentioned, he had started a label, and so they put out that record for us. But it was the same sort of, you know, just smaller thing of friends putting out an album.
Yeah, man. Well, and like I said, I was able to take a trip through the whole catalog today, just to beef up here on our conversation, and it's great. I would suggest to everybody check out Mansion's back catalog. I mean, it's on Spotify. It's pretty much, I would say, anywhere that you would normally stream music. I'm sure it's on iTunes and all that sort of thing, correct?
Yeah.
Yeah, definitely check out the back catalog. But really, before we go any further, I want to kind of pause this convo here, and I want to play the newest track, because kind of like what I was saying earlier there, that, you know, I hadn't kind of heard from you musically in a minute, and then I saw the article. It's like, hey, Mansions is back with a new album, and you can stream the song here. And as soon as I heard it, I was like, man, this is something special. Got to have you on the show, and I want everybody else to hear it too. So tell everyone briefly here about Heel Theme, and let's go ahead and play it for everybody.
Yeah, so this song, it's the first song on our new EP that comes out on the 3rd of November. It was one that at first it was just like an instrumental song that I was like, this is cool. I don't think this will turn into anything. But I'm really happy with how it came together as kind of a real band song.
Fantastic. Well, without further ado, guys, this is Mansion's brand new single. It's called Heel Theme. All right, guys, that was Heel Theme by Mansions, and I love that one, man. It's different, and biggest difference for me is got a real synth vibe here. I'm used to hearing you playing some guitar. I'm not used to this kind of I don't know, man. It's kind of dark, kind of powerful, kind of ambient. I don't know. I loved it.
That's cool, man. I appreciate that. Yeah, I mean, we've always had like little pieces of synthesizer going on, but it was cool to get to build it around that.
Yeah, man. What was the writing process like for you for this one? Let's talk about the new album coming up. Is this going to be? Is this single basically going to be like a template, something else that we can look into with this album? Maybe it being more synth driven, or
I'm not sure. Like, so this it's just 6 songs, the EP, and it's fairly wide ranging. I would say, like, that sounds sort of douchey to say, but like, this song is really synth heavy. There's another song that's coming out this week that is super synth heavy. But then there's like another song that's just like fuzzy guitars going the whole way. And there's another one that's more guitar based. Like, so, we're not becoming an electronic band or something. But I really like synths, and a lot of bands that I'm into, like, LCD Sound System and stuff like that, are more in that world. And sometimes it just feels like with like rock music, it can be hard to like find a new thing to do.
Sure. Mm-hmm.
There's not a whole lot of like interesting rock music being made right now. Like, I feel like a lot of the more interesting stuff is with like hip hop, and even like pop music is doing kind of weird stuff right now, or at least has been for the last couple of years.
I don't feel like there's really hardly a lot of rock and roll, man, or rock music in general. It's, the stuff you hear on the radio is much more poppy, or there's metal or metalcore or some sort of the Warped Tour sound. Like, it's kind of strange, man. It's a strange time for rock music.
Yeah, exactly. There isn't a lot of that. Like, there's some of like the kind of lighter rock bands that I like a lot of that stuff too, but there's kind of not the like, the like Weezers of the world. Like,
right.
Even Weezer isn't really Weezer anymore,
Right, exactly.
So like for us, we're doing this EP, and the way that we did it like worked really well, to where I would like to kind of get on a more steady track of just like putting out EPs regularly.
Sure.
Just because it takes so long to get enough songs for a full length. And with the way people like consume music now, I'm not against EPs in the way that I was like 10 years ago.
Sure. Well, the way people consume it, they're just almost more like singles and a music video,
Yeah.
They put out
like
a few songs, stream it, and then, a lot of people don't have time to sit down and listen to 10 songs in this day and age. As weird as that sounds, like people they don't have 45 minutes to give to an album.
Yeah, I've always like been an album guy, but now when I look at like new releases on Spotify, if something is more than a few songs, I'm like, oh man, I don't want to really sit down for that.
Geez, I'm not a triathlete here. I got to go to work.
Exactly. Yeah.
So, what's your mindset? Where's your head at when you're recording this? Because now you're recording this. You're in Seattle. You settled down to your new life there. You got married. You mentioned Robin playing bass in the band, but that's your wife also. So now you're married. You guys are working. What's the mindset like with the songwriting? Where you guys where are you at in the production of this, the creation of this EP?
So for the EP, it took a long time, and it's only 6 songs, but there were so many written and really like totally fleshed out as like full-fledged songs that just didn't make the cut. And I think I had a little bit of a like crisis of confidence as far as like what should the band sound like? Does anyone care? Just all that stuff that comes with writing songs.
With just being a musician in general, like, are people going to like me? I want them to like me.
Yeah, exactly. It's just and you have to kind of try on different different hats or different, dress up in different ways and see, like, do we want the band to sound like this? Like, oh no, that's terrible.
Sure. And then you got to
So
walk the line. Like, do I give them a little bit more of what they're used to? Do I go in a totally different direction? How do I find that happy medium?
yeah, exactly. I think we've been really lucky that we haven't ever been like so successful that there's the weight of expectations or worrying about people getting mad and that kind of thing.
Right.
Which is nice, but it also means that it's just kind of wide open. Like we can be any band that we want. But it's always takes a long time, like at least a year of like figuring out like what do we want this to be like. And I had written a bunch of songs and they were like, okay. And I was trying to do something with them. And then I had a synthesizer that was up on a shelf above my desk and it fell onto my computer while I was recording. And it like just trashed my hard drive. Like the whole thing was just dead.
Oh my gosh. So a synthesizer just toasted your computer.
Yeah. And it was like, on a weekend where I was like moving files around, so I was like in between backups, so I basically like lost everything that I'd been working on. But then it was like, all right, well maybe the songs weren't that good, like if I'm not freaking out that bad about them being gone, so maybe I should just keep writing. And that was when then I was kind of writing more synth-based stuff and just trying to push it a little bit harder.
It's a sign, dude. It was an epiphany right there, man.
Well, I know. I thought, well, this will be a good like narrative for the press release or whatever. So I guess I should write more synth-based stuff.
There you go, man. And dude, it's a good thing an accordion didn't fall on your laptop, because otherwise it's going to be a totally different record.
That's right. Anything could happen.
Yes, this is Mansions, not Weird Al here, but this is going to be mostly accordion-based tracks here on this one. So,
yeah, it's fate.
It's fate, yes. So what are your plans now here for the future? So upon release, we're here, as of the time that this podcast released, we're in the first week of November.
Cool.
So where, what's going on here in the world of Mansions in the first week of November, and what's going on here for the rest of the year, and so on and so forth?
So what seems most interesting to do right now for us is to be a local band. Like we've never really gotten to be a local band, and like how we were talking about playing shows in Louisville and that kind of thing, like that was really fun. But then like once Mansions started up, it was like we would say we were from Louisville, but like I was living in North Carolina and we weren't really playing shows in North Carolina. And then the people playing in the band have always been all over. So it was like we would tour, and then when we were not touring, that was like downtime to not be playing shows, and that kind of thing. And like that's cool in a way. Like I really like touring, but I feel like we've missed out on getting to be like a local band and build up like a local following and getting to practice for more than just like the 5 days before going on tour.
Right.
So like we're trying to just play local shows and with local bands and not do the whole gross thing of like trying to land big tours or like open at the House of Blues for big band coming to town, that just doesn't sound very interesting. And we're not trying to like catch our big break or something.
Sure.
We just want to play shows and put out music. And so we found a guy up here to play drums for us locally for shows. And we're just planning on playing more, hopefully recording more and getting more stuff out there, being a little more active, I'd say.
Yeah. Well, I can't wait. I can't wait to hear what comes of it. I can't wait to hear the new EP. Is there like a certain release date that you're going to have for the album?
Yeah, it comes out on the 3rd of November, that Friday.
November 3rd, that Friday. And so at this. So basically, guys, let me break the wall of illusion here for you guys. This is pre-recorded. Obviously, we are not. This is not live. This is not a live podcast. So here we are. We are in November. This is November 7th. So this album's been out for 4 days. I guess. Yeah. So
nice.
This album's been out for 4 days, and I love it. I picked it up just now, and yeah. But I will buy it as soon as it comes out and support you guys, and I can't wait. So. Yeah, where can people find Mansions online to check out all the music, check out everything that's going on, and keep abreast of all the latest news?
Yeah, so there is thisismansions.com, but Facebook is probably the best way. This label called Bad Timing Records is the one who's putting out this new EP, and so they have the vinyl for order and all that kind of good stuff. Cassette.
Oh, it will be out on vinyl?
Yeah, vinyl, cassette, and digital.
Fantastic. Well, I'm going to be ordering that. If it's, is it up for pre-order? And well, I guess it's up for order now by the time this is released. So I will have it. I will have it on vinyl. And that's my new favorite thing. I mean, I wasn't ever into records really before. Never really had time to sit down and listen to records just in general. Because you'd be out on the road and stuff, so you're listening to your phone, an iPod, CDs, the radio, whatever. But now that I've got time to hang out, do this podcast, unwind at the end of the day, grab a beer, put on an album, you know what I'm saying? I enjoy it, man. And we're talking about the way people consume music now, like owning a record player and listening to an LP is like totally changed the way I consume it. Because now I'm like, well, I'm just listening to one side and then I'm listening to the other side. I'm not listening to 10 separate tracks anymore. And I really get a lot out of it, especially the older records and stuff, because I'm like, so this is the feeling, the Beatles were going for, one side at a time, not just one song at a time.
Yeah, totally. Yeah, I really like that. And the thinking about things as the sides, where it's almost like two mini albums together, makes a big difference.
Fantastic. Well, Chris, this has been a great hour just catching up and everything. And it was great to hear your voice. And you got to come back for a part 2. That's for sure.
Totally. Anytime, man.
I feel like we just skimmed the surface, man. But we have a lot of great stories to tell and a lot of, we can get a little bit more in depth. But we had a lot of years to cover, man. We've got, it's been 10 years since we probably last sat down and had a real conversation. And we knew each other for 5 or 6 years before that. So
yeah, right.
We had a lot of time to cover there. So I'm so glad that everything's going so well for you, brother. So glad that you're happy up there in Seattle. So glad that there's new music. And I want to keep everybody posted and shoot the links in the show notes. And guys, if you're listening, you want to keep up on Mansions, just check out the show notes. There'll be links to everything. And yeah, man. So I'm excited for you, dude. Thank you so much for doing the show.
Thank you. Congrats on the podcast.
Hey,
keep up good work.
I appreciate that. Are you gonna be back home for Thanksgiving and Christmas?
I don't think so. We're figuring out holidays, but probably not anytime soon.
Well, keep me posted, because if you are, you can come here and we'll do part 2 together over an eggnog or a Miller High Life.
That would be great, man. Champagne and beers.
Exactly. And guys, if you like what you heard today, like I said, all the links to Mansion's new album will be in the show notes. And then, of course, you can always like, share, and subscribe the podcast on social media. It's on iTunes and Stitcher, Facebook, Instagram, Twitter, YouTube. Everything's at Sean vs. Wild, pretty much. Instagram's at Sean vs. Wild podcast. But yeah, and please tell a friend, please subscribe, give me a 5-star rating, whatever the case might be, and give Mansions a 5-star rating on iTunes, because you guys are worth it. You guys deserve it. So yeah. But Chris, again, thanks so much. It was so great to catch up with you today.
Thanks for having me, man. This was fun.
Yeah, no problem. And guys, thanks for tuning in. This has been the Sean vs. Wild podcast.